Good morning, everyone. My name is Jack Patel. I am the Global Conferences Coordinator here at the University of Riverside. We are so excited to have you here, and with great pleasure, I welcome all our presenters and the attendees to the Global Education Conference today on May 13th, 2021. University of Riverside is a private university located in Southern California in the city of Riverside. We are an educational organization that centers on building strong global leadership and community development. This conference on global education provides an opportunity for great leaders and professionals such as yourself around the world to meet, collaborate, and network together to move to a higher level of global leadership. So I just would like to say I want to make sure that you understand the housekeeping rules. I'll verbally go over them as well. If you have any questions or answers during the presentation, it's best to go ahead and type them in the Q&A and we will address them once the speaker is finished their presentation. And if you have any other questions during it or there's an emergency, I usually keep an eye on the chat box. So please go ahead and do that. Or of course, you can always email me as well. Without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and continue to our next slide, which is our presentation of the program we want to discuss, and you should have gotten this through the email. Today, we will have 4 presentations, and they vary in different topics, but all related to education. Our first one is going to be Dr. Daryl Sims, and his title is Up to Your Hips in Crocodiles. Our next speaker at around 10:15 will be Dr. Marcia Daria, and she will be talking about how one teacher educational program answered the clarion call for social justice and equity. The next one will be Dr. Destiny Lovato. Her title is Maintaining Engagement and Providing Effective Feedback Through the World of Distance Learning. And lastly, we'll have Dr. Maha Morad from Egypt, and she will be talking about post-COVID-19, adopting of mobile technology in an emerging higher education market. And then I will have some closing remarks at the end, just some instructions about what will come and what you have to look forward to in emails. Therefore, I'm going to go ahead and introduce, we're going to go on to our first presentation, and that is Dr. Daryl Sims. We have a little bit of biography on him as well, and he can tell you a little bit about himself, but just giving you a little tidbits would be, he does have a bachelor's degree from La Sierra College, a master's in anthropology from Loma Linda University, and then finally a Doctor of Education degree from Northern Arizona University. Some of his activities include test preparation for CBEST, GR, and the SAT examinations. And some of his other interests and hobbies, but mainly are martial arts and master holding a 5th degree black belt. So whenever you're ready, Dr. Sims, go ahead.
I am ready. Next slide, please. I'm Daryl Sims. I'm going to be discussing the topic on your screen, Up to Your Hips and Crocodiles, and I'm sure it's something I don't have to explain. Next slide. Dedicating this presentation to individuals I met at conferences at the University of Riverside. Ismail Saidi, Islamic Tibet University, Tehran, Iran, and I hope he's well. Stephen McKenzie, University of Melbourne, and Felia Garavaldis, Monash University in Australia. And we all met there at the University of Riverside when presenting, and I hope we can do it again. Next slide. As Jack pointed out, I spent a fair amount of time in public secondary education on the middle school level and junior high level, as well as various universities. And we'll be stressing things that we all have in common as educators, regardless of where we are, where our backgrounds happen to be. Next slide. This is a citation from a textbook that was just published, and I don't have my copy right here next to me, but I will hold it up during the presentation at some point. Next slide. My time is spent in research, design, and statistics, and I have chaired many of the meetings for the University of Riverside and have stressed that we are educators, but what we are actually about is providing clarity, meaning what we are doing is understood. If it is not, then we have wasted everybody's time. And I will state there are too many examples of poorly done research based upon what I call the everybody knows that fallacy, where somebody will talk about something and the attitude is, well, I don't have to provide any clarity because everybody knows that. No, everybody does not know that. Next slide. The what I call the 80-20 evaluation approach is something I find appalling. Where, let's say, a student has written up a presentation of however length, let's say 3 typewritten pages, and expect for it to be graded 80% on content and 20% on oh, grammar, syntax, spelling, punctuation, all those other things. Next slide. I would equate that approach to what I have on the screen. And it will take a few seconds, let you give it a quick glance. Lori, the book that's on the bookcase there. Now, I am guessing, hopefully I'm not wrong, but I am guessing that everybody hearing my words are familiar with this particular passage. Next slide. Now, if we mentally compare and contrast to what you are looking at here and what you looked at the page before, you can see where the grading strictly on context is a flawed approach. Again, we are about clarity. Next slide. Before I present some terms, this is the textbook that the bibliographic entry was based upon. And it came about because of an invitation I received at a University of Riverside gathering where I met Felia and Stephen. We shared some thoughts, and Stephen issued an invitation for me to write up some of my perceptions, and the chapter that is in this text was the result. It is given in a graphic display toward the end of this presentation, and anyone wishing further information need only send me an email. All right, some terms having to do with research, bias, anything that can cause wrong information. And let's shed some clarity here. If the mistake that is made was inadvertent, you didn't mean to make the mistake, yet the information came out wrong, the whole thing has been botched. It's over, done. An example I frequently use, and Jeanette, who is watching the presentation, who is an RN, understands this far better than most, is you can't say, well, I didn't mean to inject rubbing alcohol into the patient's IV. I taught many hundreds of nursing statistics.
Dr. Sims, we can no longer hear you. Dr. Sims, can you hear me? There, much better. Okay.
Okay. You went blank on my screen. Okay, hopefully everybody can see me. The things that I present in presentation are bias, what I call the iron law, and the ugly question. And I would encourage any wanting further information to drop me an email, and I will be happy to send over a written presentation because this particular format is limiting. Next slide. Under the topic of bias are what I call misdirections, where a presenter will use various words or phrases and expect that the listeners understand it. And I put a few of them up here. It seems apparent. The question is, what seems apparent? Well, wait a minute. Everybody knows that. There's, and one of the things I noted, Mark Twain noted there are three types of lies: lies, damn lies, and statistics. And I've been in presentations where somebody said, Mark Twain said that. No, he did not. Benjamin Disraeli did. If you give wrong information, it's automatically biased. Next slide. Fatal errors, mistakes that are made that can't be recovered from. Enough said. Next slide. You can have bias from poor mechanics. Look at the first two. Now, I have seen mistakes like that made in presentations. Usually those listening are polite enough not to snicker and point. Now, that said, if you're presenting to a group of engineers, you're on your own. Next slide. More fatal errors. These I took from master's theses, doctoral dissertations, have seen in presentations, and so on. And anybody who wants a translation into English of why these are such fatal errors, drop me an email and I'll be happy to add a little explanation. I recall one presentation where I was chairing the conference, and Dr. Singh, the university president, who is an engineer, looked at the formula down at the bottom and immediately started snickering. Next slide. Now, one of the dilemmas that we face in presentations of this nature is that as far as languages are concerned, English is the world's worst. And many times I have had someone catch me at a conference and ask me, will you explain what this means in English? And so I've spent a break trying to explain something. What I would say is when you have time, punch up this slide in the presentation and read it out loud. Next slide. This is precisely what we are facing, among other things. You can be really great at what you are doing. However, next slide. In these particular times where all of us are on the same page, facing the same dilemmas, how are we as educators going to improve circumstances? Now, that is a question that is pertinent in South Africa as it is in Australia, in Nigeria as it is in Egypt. The virus was completely impartial and nailed everybody. Now, we as educators are the ones who have fingers being pointed at us, saying, okay, it seems we're getting the upper hand on the virus. You all go ahead and square things away. And by the way, while you're at it, get it done effective yesterday. That concludes my presentation. It is always a pleasure. And I will be happy to answer any questions anyone may wish to give. Jag, you're on.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sims. I appreciate that. Thank you very much. At this time, if you do have questions, you'd have to type them in the Q&A and I can read them out so that we can go ahead and continue that.
Not a problem from this end.
Okay.
You know, to teach those students and to understand where they come from and their backgrounds. Excuse me, a demographic survey was completed by the people in this survey it simply asks, what is your name? What is your age? Your level of education, and if you're teaching, how long have you been teaching? It was a qualitative design in that I interviewed 25 people for this study. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Okay. The questions that I asked are as follows. How do you view equity and social justice? What I found is that they were very limited in their responses. It's, for example, one person said, it's just, I view this as everyone being equal. The next question is, how do you see your role in teaching for equity and social justice? Many teachers felt that they saw no need to teach for social justice and equity. They felt that they weren't prejudiced, that they were colorblind, especially those not of color, and that their job was not to focus on social justice and equity, but to teach students. What training have you had in teaching for equity and social justice? Many teachers had not had any training. However, our pre-service people, meaning our candidates at my university and those at another university, said that they have been exposed to social justice and equity issues, but had not had any in-depth training. How might teachers be motivated to teach for equity and social justice? Of course, those students of the candidates of color were motivated to talk about it because of what was going on in the news, with Michael Brown or George Floyd or Breonna Taylor, and felt that they could bring it in somehow, some way into their curricula. How have you modified lessons to include equity and social justice? Both practicing teachers and teachers of color said that they bring in guest speakers, or they use diverse people in their curricula, or they have resources that they use within their classroom that represent people who are different or who are diverse. Next slide, please. How do you think teaching for equity and social justice addresses students' needs? Several of the people interviewed said that it will cause teachers to be more sensitive to students of color in their classrooms. The next question, how can teaching for equity and social justice benefit all students? A response was that all students will become aware of some of the issues that students face in their everyday lives. Number 8, how can university faculty better prepare their students to teach social justice and equity? I got a lot of responses on that. Some people said use what's happening in the news. Someone said it could be done in simulation format. Some people said don't say anything at all. So there was a broad range of responses there. Excuse me, what topics should be included in a university equity and social justice program? Some teachers said that, we could talk about, for example, in social economics, we could talk about how some people have resources, some do not. There was just a large gamut of ways or suggestions to teach, social justice and equity. And number 10 is, how can teaching for social justice and equity impact communities? One response in particular said that it will make students who are our future become more aware of what takes place in communities in terms of social justice, and to be more mindful of others when talking about social justice and equity. So there was a broad range in responses to these questions. It was interesting because it was interesting to see the disparity between those students who are in our program, who are a lot younger, and then those who were actually practicing. Although those in the middle, the responses vary depending on their political standpoint, and that definitely came into play with some of the responses that I received. Okay, let's go to the next slide, please. Okay, so the theoretical framework that I used for this study was the critical race theory, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. And the critical race theory basically holds that racism is the driving force in society, that in order to understand power relations, in order to understand, institutions such as, schools or, even the law or the Constitution, you have to understand that these things through the lens of race, the experiences of people and how they were raised. So that's what critical race theory basically says. And of course, it is composed of 5 tenets, and the 2 tenets that I chose for this were counter storytelling, which is used to magnify stories and experiences and those narratives and truths of the underprivileged. I say counter because we're so accustomed to storytelling that's been told by the dominant population. So this counters this. This is storytelling from those people who are often marginalized. And then, of course, permanence of racism, whether it's intentional or unintentional, racism still exists in our society. Also used, and they're pretty much used interchangeably, critical reflection, which is a process for identifying and questioning and assessing our assumptions, what our beliefs are. And then, of course, reflective thinking, which is active and persistent and careful consideration of our beliefs. So they're pretty much used interchangeably in terms of reflecting or reflection is concerned. Next slide, please. Okay, some of the comments from our candidates I thought were very interesting, and I thought I would share a few of them with you. Let's see if I can move my pictures are in the way. So Marilyn, who is 19 years old, she's African-American. She said, I understand that the kids I teach will have to deal with injustices because I deal with them too. And I have to be ready to talk with students about them. Hopefully the content will be taught using real cases. I feel this is important so that we can relate to the material, since more than likely the cases took place during our lifetime. And so what Marilyn, says here, and what she continued to talk about during my interview, is that, these kids know what's going on. They see it in their face. And it's, about how we talk to them about it. We don't have to say, oh, this person was shot, or this person, something happened here. But she looked at more, she examined more the approach. She said that we should talk about it because it's definitely going to filter into our classrooms. And then we had Justin, who is 17 years old, Hispanic American. I think teaching for social justice and equity is the right thing to do, since there are a lot of students from different colors and cultural backgrounds in schools. I feel comfortable talking about them and believe everybody who wants to be teach should have this kind of, or I think it's everybody who wants to be a teacher should have this kind of training. So Justin was in favor of teaching for social justice and equity. Next slide, please. Nicole, 19, African American. I know that social justice and equity can happen anywhere. It is important to make all students aware of how people are mistreated so they can speak up when they see something that isn't right. Even though I am Black, I have to make sure that I think clearly and not let my personal experiences with being discriminated against creep into my teaching. And that's a very important point. When at my department, we also surveyed students in our students who are non-students of color in this realm as well. And so, we often think about them not being exposed to some of the social justice and inequities that students of color experience, but also students of color have to share their experiences so that their discrimination or their biases do not creep into the classroom. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is what we did to change our program. after the interviews, after collecting all the information, after discussing social justice and equity, after being aware of what's happening in our community, we took all that information and we wanted to reform or modify our program to better prepare the majority students in our program for the society of students they will be teaching. So we created a new social justice and equity and diversity course. It's a standalone course that will address many of the issues that I mentioned before in terms of microcultures, differences in language, and how these people are treated when they come here, immigrants, religious differences, how does that impact education, social economic level, and what can we do about it? What can you do about it as a future teacher? Curricula were revised, meaning that, in just a few minutes, I'll show you just a briefing of how we've done that, but social justice and equity will be discussed in every class every semester for the 4 years that the students will be in our program. And of course, clinical fieldwork experience was modified, meaning that students will create lessons and during their field work will execute those lessons with the students they teach. Of course, they will team with their mentor teacher to create the lessons. And of course, they will be age appropriate and developmentally appropriate for the students they teach. A social justice outreach learning experience was added, and this is more of a community service emphasis where students will take on one issue within the community and try to address that. And this is what's added so that they can become more sensitive to and aware of some of the problems that students at the elementary level face. So it's really like them getting out in the trenches and learning more about some of the issues that they face. Next slide, please. This is what I was talking about earlier. As I mentioned before, within our 4-year program, every semester, at least one course per semester will address a social justice and equity issue. So example, course 101, freshman year fall. This course will address racial, language, ethnic, religious inequality, voting rights, bullying, anti-racism, and so forth. In the spring of freshman year, they will talk about economics in course 197, equality, LGBTQ, fall, sophomore year, school segregation, globalization, immigration, income gap, housing. So you'll see that there's a variety of topics. It's just not race. Oftentimes we think just race, but we'll examine other areas too where people are marginalized and where people are struggling or do not have equal rights. And so we will, address those issues as well. Next slide, please. Okay, so let me just move here, sorry. Okay, so what to consider, what does social justice offer for us in general? How does it affect our society and how does it affect students in schools? Sometimes teachers unintentionally call on certain students and not others, or unintentionally assume that because a child comes to school dirty, his parents doesn't care, or they, I could go on and on and on with stories about how social justice happens in schools. It will also better the student-teacher relationships. When students feel that teachers care, then they tend to do better in school. They feel like they can go to their teacher with any concerns that they might have, and the relationship is better as a whole. In turn, it will increase or make the classroom environment more conducive to learning for all students. And of course, in terms of student dilemmas, they will be easily resolved because of that, students will feel comfortable, as I mentioned, that the relationships would be established. And of course, the classroom environment will be more welcoming to all students. Next slide, please. Okay, as I mentioned before, we've modified the elementary education program. We talk about biases. We really spend a lot of time on biases for all students, because we know that we are what we know, how we were raised, our experiences, our beliefs. And so we will examine those biases and try to dispel them in the classroom. As I mentioned, service learning, we've added that component so that students can become more aware of what some groups encounter or the issues they're faced with. And of course, field work experience with mentor teachers, so that they'll develop lesson plans that are age appropriate for those students on social justice and equity, and getting along, and the importance of getting along with others. Okay. Now I can share my screen if that's possible.
Yes, let me go ahead and
Okay.
let me go ahead and do that. And I'm going to stop share. There you go.
Okay. And forgive me, because I have a lot of icons on my computer, so I'm going to try to grab it right quick. Let's see if I can do. I don't know if I'll be able to. Now that I look, let's see if I can do that. If not, no worries. I'll be done. Just a minute.
No problem.
Okay, just let me see if I can stop this. Okay, so let's see if I can. Okay. I don't think I'll be able to do it because of the way it's set up, but yeah. I don't think I'll be able to.
Before the conference is over, you may email it, and in between the speaker, I will check. Usually when I'm recording, the computer doesn't allow me to do anything else.
Okay.
So,
okay.
Usually it will allow me to do other things, or when I'm not screen sharing. So if you would send it, I don't mind playing it towards the end or whatever. So you can
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that sounds good. I'll send it at the end. How about that? If we have time. If we have time, if not, no worries.
Oh, there's plenty of time. We have plenty of time, so we're good.
Okay.
We're definitely good.
All right. Thank you.
No, I appreciate that. Thank you so much for the presentation. It's a great topic, especially right now, and what is going on, and how it affects where you're at and in society, and just it teaches so much more than beyond the everyday education that I know we need math, English, and science. But reality is we have these things happening around kids, and so students and even adults are affected. So
absolutely
definitely needed, and the topic was quite definitely very informative.
Thank you.
At this time, I'm going to open it up for any questions. If you don't mind typing them in the Q&A, that would be great. And then Dr. Daria can answer. I'm going to give that a few minutes here. Let you think about it so we can get some discussion, hopefully.
Everybody's quiet today.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's definitely an area that a lot of teacher training programs do not want to address, because it just opens up a bag of worms in some ways. You know what I mean? It's more to talk about. You know, we're so busy talking about accreditations or credentialing and what the state wants, and dealing with those issues. And now you add on, okay, let's talk about social justice and equity and how we're training our people in that area, in those areas. And, how should we do it without sounding biased or without being, prejudice or whatever, so it's really a sticky wicket. You have to be very careful. And the way we chose to do it is to allow our students to examine themselves first, their biases, how you were raised and how you view things, and to look at simulations and how would you respond to this, And then when we open it up and say, well, no, this is not what really happened. This is what happened. And then they're like, oh, maybe I should have looked at it this way. So it's really interesting, to see how it happened. What we take for granted, and that people of color are not a threat, that they want the same thing you want too. I mean, there's good and bad in every group, but everybody wants the same thing. And because of what you think from the TV, or because you've seen a number of people with their hands behind their backs being handcuffed, you've developed a certain perception or belief about this group of people, and that's not necessarily always true. So thank you.
Very good points, Deb. Very valid. I do have a question. So when these courses are they currently being developed by anybody? Are you involved?
They will be fully executed in the fall. Some of them, actually, these are courses that are already in play. And what we did was have teachers or professors go through their courses and comb through what areas of social justice and equity are being addressed in your class. So it's not like they're starting all over again. These are issues that they've been doing, but they've never really highlighted. And so what we're saying is just go ahead and highlight those areas, talk about them a little more in depth so that students are aware of them, and so that we can, keep this line going throughout the 4 years.
Oh, definitely. So it'll be a lot of field work and things like that to develop those courses. And so, yeah, and being that you're doing it at this, local level, I mean, is there what are your future research, or are you planning to take this further out?
Well, we hope to eventually, as I mentioned before, right now it's at the elementary level. We hope to expand it to like our secondary level, and then, into our graduate program. So we're starting small, and then we hope to, eventually. And then, so the more we talk about it, more schools of education at universities are hearing about it, and perhaps they'll do the same thing. Maybe they'll talk about these topics, with their students or their candidates as well. And, through this, hopefully we can make a change or a difference in people's perceptions, especially since most teacher education programs are majority white, majority middle class, majority middle age teachers, people becoming teachers, and yet in our public schools it's mostly minority. So that's why it's so important to understand them and where they come from and what they are about. And so that's why we're talking about that.
Yeah, so I'm part of a local district here in California, and just recently the Board of Education passed to put ethnic studies as a elective. So, which is a big step as well out here.
Yeah.
So glad they did that, and I'm not sure what it's going to entail, but I'll definitely look into it further.
Yeah, so important. That's a good first step. Yeah,
it is, and bringing that cultural level. And like, I love that you mentioned the student-teacher relationship.
Right.
It's better when the teacher cares. I think when you understand the student's cultural background, and it doesn't matter what color, it's just more engaging, and they inform themselves of possibly how that student may learn.
Absolutely. Yeah, because we get into differentiated instruction, how they learn best, and how you have to modify instruction, as well. Just like the voting thing that's going on, in certain states, they're making it harder for people to vote.
Yes.
What impact will that have on others? So we'll talk about a lot of issues in terms of social justice and equity. Like you said, it's not just the color of the skin, it's just inequities in general that some people, the LGBTQ, just all kinds. So.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's been a great pleasure listening to you this morning.
Thank you, Jag.
Yes, no problem. Thank you. I want to go ahead and just give it a few seconds here if anybody has anything to add in the Q&A or in the chat box at this time in regards to Dr. Daria's informative presentation on social injustice and inequity. Okay, so it doesn't seem there's anything that needs to be addressed at this time. We do have our next speaker and we're running a mile probably an hour ahead of schedule. So what I'm going to do at this time, let's go ahead and come back at 10:15, give you another break or so to do what you need to do. So at 10:15, we will come back with Dr. Destiny Lovato. Thank you so much for being here this morning. Good morning and welcome back, everybody. I hope everyone is still here. Just want to do a little reminder here. If you are muted or unmuted, make sure that you stay on mute so we don't hear the background noise. And then I did include Dr. Sim's email in the chat or box so that now that you have that, you can, I don't have to email it to everybody like I said. So it is there for you guys. The next speaker is here, so I'm going to go ahead and screen share first her biography, and then I can stop share. And then Dr. Lovato, you had said that you'd like to go ahead and present on your side, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much for being here this morning.
Of course, thank you for having me.
Oh yes, anytime. So Dr. Destiny Lovato has graduated with a double Bachelor of Science in Criminal Justice and Paralegal Studies from California State University, San Bernardino, which is very local to us here near Riverside. She earned her master's in public administration from University of Phoenix. Then finally, she has earned her PhD in public policy and administration from Walden University just recently in 2020. So any more information, I'm going to let her fill in. I just wanted to give a little synopsis of who she is, and I'm going to go ahead and stop share, Dr. Lovato, and you may go ahead and continue.
All right, thank you. Sorry about that. I was having technical difficulties getting back to Zoom.
It's okay, as we all do.
So let me go ahead and share my screen, make sure that this is all good to go. Did you give me that capability?
Yeah, I did. It's allowing it, I said all panelists, so let's see, go ahead and try now.
Let me see. I might have to go to here. All right, let's see if it comes up.
It is on, and you can do,
Perfect.
yeah, you can hit play at the top and it'll go to the
Goodness.
screen. Yes, thank you.
Awesome. Sorry about that.
No, absolutely, no problem.
Okay. So this presentation is specific to maintaining engagement and providing effective feedback through the world of distance learning due to the COVID environment that we're currently enduring for the last over a year now. I know that a lot of, if not all of the universities, especially in California, have gone to an online modality specifically. No face-to-face is being offered at this time. So this is mainly about this engagement, and then of course how you're going to provide that effective feedback to your students during this transition period. This is kind of an interactive presentation, as you will. So currently I went ahead and posted the website here, or you can go to menti.com and put in the voting code of 1782 8649, and I will also go ahead and post it in the chat so it'd be a little bit easier. There we go. So if you just want to go ahead and click on that, because there are some questions we're going to go through as far as you guys will be answering them, and they will come up on the presentation itself. So And let me know if you need a little bit more time to go ahead and do that. If not, then I can go ahead and continue.
We can give it a few minutes. I know there's some people still trying to settle in with the technology again after the break, so
Perfect.
thank you. Dr. Lovato, will you be able to tell if anybody has taken the?
I will once I transfer over to the other screen, actually.
I have asked in the chat box also to click on the link. Since this isn't more of a interactive one, we would appreciate it as Dr. Lovato continues our presentation, that you participate hopefully by clicking on the link so that we can move on and get some information.
Okay. Let me actually pull it up. I can pull it this way right quick and give you guys a little bit more time. Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and go into this. Again, the link is posted. So if you want to go ahead and do that, go ahead and click on the link. It will take you directly to the voting pages. And then you will figure out when we're going to be utilizing those. Because this is specific to engagement, I thought that it would be kind of neat to engage all of you. This is actually, Mentimeter is a software or a program that was introduced to me actually in my full-time line of work. So we have various conferences, obviously with the County of San Bernardino, trainings, etc. And we're unable to do them in face-to-face environments. So we've been doing a lot of them through WebEx, which is very similar to Zoom. And one of the things that they utilized was this software, and it really engaged, the population that they were seeking to express their message to. So whether it was employees or supervisors, managers, all of the above. So I found it very useful. And as an instructor, I plan on using it because I think that it's actually a pretty neat interactive tool. So I thought, why not introduce it here? So we'll go ahead and dive in. So engagement. So student engagement is defined as a student's psychological investment in and effort directed toward learning. understanding or mastering the knowledge, skills, or crafts that academic work, is intended to promote. Student engagement pertains to the time and physical energy that students exert on activities in their academics. One of the primary components of effective instruction or teaching is student engagement. According to a 2003 NSSE survey based on engagement and 10-point scale, most colleges in the United States fell between 4 and 6 on the scale. And so this is when we'll go ahead and utilize this. So I want you to think about a time when you were a student. I know that we have all been students at one point or another, especially college students. So did you feel more engaged in a classroom setting or an online modality or setting? So I will go ahead and pull up my iPad because I have it on here. And then if you'll go ahead and click on the link, then you guys should be able to go ahead and vote. Let's see if I can go ahead and switch this over. Okay. Can you guys see that?
Yes.
Perfect. So we did have one vote, and then let's go ahead and do it this way. So both, great job on that one. It really depends, because personally, when I was a student, I felt more compelled to feel more engaged with the interaction on a face-to-face setting. And the reason being is because you are getting, that interaction that a lot of people crave and need, and it's more of that one-on-one undivided attention. I'm able to ask a question and get an answer right off the bat, rather than sending it in an email, which a lot of the times, depending on the email itself, can be misinterpreted based on language. And then not have to wait for a response from the instructor or a peer or somebody of that nature. So personally, I've always preferred, even instructing, I prefer face-to-face settings over online settings. And most of the classes that I teach are actually a blended modality. So they spend about 40% online and about 60% in the classroom. So Moore's 3 types of interaction meaningful learning. So this little bubble chart basically breaks down the 3 types of interaction according to Moore, including learner to learner, learner to instructor, and learner to content. The learner to learner interaction is ultimately student engagement between one another. It is designed to build a sense of community and allows the students to feel connected even through their class is online. Some of this interaction includes discussion boards, chat options, peer assignments, and group projects. Learner to learner or learner to instructor, engagement can be more student engagement in the online classroom. It includes, but is not limited to, grading feedback, contact with the instructor, but also any opportunity for the instructor to engage with the students, both one-on-one as well as online in a group. This development of rapport between the students and their instructor is important in enhancing and strengthening the student engagement within the course. Finally, learner to content engagement is intellectually interacting with the course content, such as instructional videos. According to Moore, this can change a learner's understanding and perspective. So there are 3 different types, of course, on how it is that they are focused. Students' outcomes are focused on test scores and grading, their attitudes about their learning, and then overall student satisfaction with online learning. So Gayton and McQuinn believe that an interactive, cohesive environment that includes assignment, substantial feedback, and work groups are what students need for success. How to engage. I need to move my little screen because it's blocking it. Assignments where students can interact with one another in the course content. not just present the opportunity, but require that interaction. So I know some instructors require participation because it's part of their grade. You have that participation aspect, you receive participation points. I personally will offer extra credit now and then for participation within a course. So it just depends on how that instructor wants to go about actually requiring their students to engage versus, oh, well, you can if you want. You do have peer reviews, group projects, discussions, and this can include both online discussion, obviously, and face-to-face discussion. Instructor feedback, that also includes grading because that's where you get a lot of the feedback from your instructor is in grades. Instructor interaction, whether it's through chat, video conference, such as we're now doing Zoom, or discussion. Feedback. Okay, so feedback is an essential component of all learning contexts. It serves a variety of purposes, including evaluation of students' achievements, development of students' competencies and understanding, and evaluation of students' motivation and confidence. So again, we're going to go back to our little Menti guy. Let me change him. And I want you to think of a time when you were a student and you were given vague feedback. How did it make you feel? I believe with this one, you can just write in one word feelings. I'll give you a second to go ahead and respond. Let's see if I can go back here because you just did that. And I'll bring that up so you guys can see it. So we have perplexed. Yeah, absolutely. A lot of students do feel perplexed. They feel confused. They feel their anxiety goes up. I know that I used to get really anxious when I didn't understand something and I was seeking those answers and I couldn't find them. And then I want you to also, let me go ahead and move that. Think about, did you improve? So based on the vague feedback, did you improve in your scores? Did you improve in your learning? Or did you not? So I'm gonna definitely say I didn't personally. I kind of stayed where I was at. If sometimes I even faltered because I couldn't understand what the instructor was wanting out of me. And then I want you to also think of a time as a student that you were given detailed feedback. And how did that make you feel? So personally, I know that when I was given detailed feedback, it allowed me to really understand where I was lacking, where my strengths were, what I needed to focus on, what I needed to change. It just gave me more conciseness and more of a detailed path of what I needed to improve on overall. So it genuinely helped me aware. Yeah, absolutely. So that's definitely something that as an instructor, I personally try to make my feedback as individualized and as specific as possible because I teach undergrad and that's a major component of someone's education, especially if they plan on going to grad studies and applying for, a master's degree or graduate school, is those things are reflected. So I always try to do my best in making it very, very specific, so the student doesn't question on, okay, what do I need to fix, or what do I need to address for the next draft or my final. And then again, if you were given that, did you improve? So personally, I always improved when that feedback was specific and when it was detailed. So sometimes as instructors, educators, supervisors, or any other capacity in which you give feedback to another person, we often forget how valuable that feedback can be. And so what ends up happening is that I think personally, we find that detailed feedback is easier to digest. It highlights both the strengths as well as the weaknesses. And by giving descriptive feedback, I can understand how to improve on those weaknesses and what I can do better on. Versus the vague feedback, again, I would say that most would say they don't improve because of the fact that they feel perplexed, right? They feel anxious. They don't know precisely what needs to be corrected and where they should go from there. Formative feedback. So formative feedback allows students to assess existing knowledge, reflect on what they have learned and what they still need to learn, and receive suggestions for improvement of future work. Formative feedback occurs during the learning process and is used to evaluate progress. It is timely, constructive, motivational, personal, manageable, and is directly related to the assessment criteria and learning outcomes. In order for formative feedback to maximize its ability for the student achievement, it must be timely. Most instructors have a turnaround time on grading, can vary anywhere from 48 hours to 6 days, depending on the assignment. Feedback is more effective if it's presented timely, of course, so the student can recall how he or she assessed each assignment. It also allows the student the ability to apply the feedback to his or her upcoming assignments. Feedback must be motivational due to negative feedback potentially having a negative effect on the student's motivation and self-esteem. Therefore, the feedback should try to stay as constructive as possible. Personal feedback must be personalized to the student, their strengths and their weaknesses. Manageable, the feedback must be detailed enough to where the student adequately understands the strengths and weaknesses and their work. Summative feedback. This is given at the end and measures the content knowledge or the skills someone has learned over a period such as their course. So we see those in finals, midterms, final projects, research papers, those kinds of things. It is structured in a way to identify if an individual has met or learned all the objectives within a course. It is essential for individuals to understand or gain understanding how close they have come in meeting their learning objectives, what they still need to work on, and what they should focus on studying. And they can influence how individuals view themselves as well as have impact on their future life decisions. We have examples of feedback. So again, you have the summative feedback. These are high stake feedback. So they're the ones that make the most amount of impact. So you're talking about your midterms, your finals usually have the most weight in these final presentations or research projects or papers, whereas formative feedback are lower stakes. So they're the ones that carry the lower grade points and don't have as much weight in the course. So you're talking about weekly quizzes, homework assignments, and then if you have a research paper that's broken down into drafts, for instance, I'm getting ready to teach a Homeland Security course in June, and they have a major research paper they have to do. But instead of just having it due in the 8th week of class, it's broken down into drafts. So you have draft 1, for instance, due in week 3, draft number 2 due in week 5, and then the final draft due in week 8. And then class discussions, this is both, again, written and verbal due to the changes in COVID and not having face-to-face courses right now. And then you have communication on feedback. So we have the traditional communication, which is handwritten comments, printouts, face-to-face meetings. And then you also have your electronic form of communication, which can be email, annotations, or comments. And then conclusion is utilize both summative and formative feedback to enhance learning amongst students. Engagement pertains to the amount of time and energy the student puts into their work. Where do instructors fit into this? How can we keep our students engaged? And what are some of the things that you do in your class to keep your students engaged? Do you prefer formative or summative feedback, or maybe a mixture of both? So these are the final questions in my Menti show. If I go here, so what are some of the things that you do or you would do to keep your students engaged? Personally, I know that during our class discussions, I have them bring up things that maybe they've seen or they've heard or they've experienced that has to do with the course curriculum. So I teach a lot of criminal justice classes, a lot of criminal law, a lot of constitutional law, criminology. For instance, I'm teaching Homeland Security. So on this next class, I may ask them, well, when have you seen a security breach firsthand? Well, we can easily identify 9/11. We can identify all of these different things that have gone on with America that they can identify, okay, this is what this is, and this is how this is applied to it. So I try to give them real life examples that ties into that course curriculum so they can identify it and then relate to it. It's easier for them to understand and remember. And then finally, which do you prefer? Personally, I prefer both formative and summative feedback because I think that it depends on what it is that you are doing. If you are doing, your research papers, I allow my students to have those drafts because you would be surprised on how many undergrad students there are now that don't even know how to write an APA format. So I'm having to teach an entire course on APA in the midst of, my criminal justice courses. Maybe they are going off center and off topic in their research paper and just writing. So you have to bring them back in. So I prefer to give them individualized feedback as well as, just points on a quiz or just easy graded things on a final, because you really can't go into detail unless it's a written final on what they're lacking. That's automatically seen with what they get wrong. And so that concludes my presentation.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lovato. Thank you, thank you. All these presentations are so informative in relation to education, and that's what we're here for today, is to learn a little bit more about what's going on. And I think that was definitely spot on, knowing that it's COVID and all the things that are going to happen, after now. Education is changed forever. There are school districts who didn't have computers, they got extra funding to do that. And so I think that hopefully those kind of funds stick around and they continue to, go forward with those kind of things as well. Are there any other questions for Dr. Lovato? I'm going to give it a few minutes here, Dr. Lovato.
Sure.
So going back to what you had mentioned about, I think it was summative and the other one, I keep forgetting what it was, but the research paper, I have my daughter who's at UCLA and she's in English class right now. And when you had said that, there's steps of helping like drafts and things like that. And she was mentioning like this week, she has her research paper due, but it's going to be a one-on-one with the professor and they're going to, work on the draft and then And I can sense when she talks about it, it's not scary to her because of that. You know, it's not, it doesn't cause that anxiety because she knows now she has that opportunity with the professor, and I don't think a lot of them probably do that. So she's looking forward to that. It's different.
Yeah, that's the formative feedback. And definitely, I mean, you don't get as bad anxiety. And it definitely, I think, will help as far as the procrastination portion of students writing papers, because I have seen the differentiation between somebody who's intimidated by a research paper and doesn't know where to begin versus somebody who is prepared and is like, okay, I know what I want to write about. I'm passionate about what I want to write about, and I
Yes.
have it laid out.
No, it definitely helps. And I know that she's expressed different concerns, and she has other professors who are doing things quite differently. So this has, you know, been different. And now that she's been into distance learning almost a year and a half, so she appreciates the nuances that occur along the way.
Yeah, and each instructor, you know, does things a little bit differently. They have their own style and they have their own ways of doing things. And
Yes.
that's one things that I have to explain to my students is, you know, I may do things one way, but your next instructor may do things a completely different way. And you have to be able to flex yourself to meet those.
Absolutely. Do you mind typing your email in the chat box, Dr. Lovato,
Sure.
please? That would be great. So any further comments, maybe discussion? Nobody has anything. If you would like to put it in the Q&A, that helps as well, or in the chat, I'll see it. And I can also go ahead and unmute you. That would allow you to talk if you would prefer talking. So just let me know.
I just have a statement. Can I talk?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I'm glad you are. Go ahead.
Okay. I was trying to figure out, wait a minute, how do I don't see my camera. I was trying to
It won't let you do camera because it's a webinar. I'd have to make you.
Oh, okay. Okay. First of all, Dr. Lovato, I enjoyed your presentation. What I struggle with sometimes, and I believe in formative and summative, because I need to know how I'm doing as I go along, and I try to provide the same service to my students, let them know how they're doing rather than waiting until summative when it's, almost over and then they get their grade. But with this online learning, I have a lot of students who don't want to turn on their cameras. And so because of that, I've tied like a class participation grade to that. So if you show your camera, you'll get it 5 extra points. Do you ever struggle with that in terms of trying to provide feedback? Huh?
No, go ahead.
Trying to provide feedback, and you're not sure if you're talking to the black screen or someone on the other side, So it's really interesting, how we've changed in terms of how we, work with students because of COVID, with the online learning. But in some ways, I see that it's a benefit, but I also see it as a drawback because I don't have that face-to-face, and I still don't have the face-to-face if they don't turn on their cameras. So I was just wondering if you ever have that, that deal with anything like that.
Yeah, and the thing is I think that's a big portion of why I prefer to teach either blended or face-to-face modalities. Being in the environment we're in now, this Homeland Security course will be the first course that I've taught since COVID, because my university kind of went to a completely online portion when COVID hit really bad last year. So we're just now getting into the swing of things with the campus centers. So luckily, I'll have to deal with that in June as far as having to get students engaged, the camera deal. But what I can tell you is I am a supervisor for the county of San Bernardino full-time. And so about 90% of our staff is telecommuting.
Mm-hmm.
And I am having the same exact issues that you were speaking about with my own staff, where we have a unit staff meeting or, a daily huddle or whatever the case may be, and they call in or their cameras aren't on. And, it's because they don't want to be seen in their PJs. Let's be real. So it definitely it is the struggle, because like you said, you don't know if you're just speaking to a blank wall or if they're actually there listening, if they're engaged. But what I can tell you, especially firsthand being a supervisor, is you can identify it in their work.
Mm-hmm.
And you can identify on who's paying attention and who's not with
Mm-hmm.
The emails you receive, with their test scores if you're doing tests, with whatever discussions, if you're doing online discussions still, you can definitely see who is engaged in that class and who isn't. And that's why, I discovered this Menti thing in my supervisor meetings with the county. And I said, hey, that's a great tool, because you can do like pop quiz almost. I know that some instructors will ask questions at the beginning of a course based on the reading material,
Mm-hmm.
to see who read the material. And so this is a great way you can do that.
Mm-hmm.
And they still don't have to turn on their camera, but at least they're participating, because you can get live feedback.
Exactly. Immediate feedback too. It's
Mhm.
sort of like Kahoot, like that Kahoot app too as well, where they would
Exactly.
respond. But yeah, I agree. The engagement is so important. And that's what, it gives me cause for concern sometimes when I don't see anybody. And, but I will probably try that Menti, like you just said, and just do it in real time. And, it's a good way to check for understanding and to see if they're actually participating and live. So,
Exactly, because if you see, if you have a class of, we'll just say 20, and you only see 17 that are responding, and you have 20 in your class, the other 3 are MIA.
Then I'll get, I went to the bathroom right quick. I had to do this, I have one student, I'm teaching summer school. I have one student who sent me an email. I sent out a notice, introducing myself and letting them know that this is a text we'll be using so that you can go ahead and get it. And then I said, plus I expect all cameras to be on, and it's tied to your class participation. She immediately sent me something back saying I have extreme anxiety and I can't turn my camera on. And so I was like, I wasn't sure how to answer that. And I asked my department chair. She said, well, there's no reason for her not to turn the camera on, even if it's facing the wall,
Yeah,
but, so
that's the thing, is that would be no different than her attending class.
exactly. That's what she said too. Yeah. So they're, they're trying, and I read somewhere where there's some students who don't even turn the camera on. They don't show up. So they can't be engaged, so it's really, but then on the other hand, it's your own setting. So you feel comfortable and you just snuggle in, you listen and you participate and do very well. So, but I like the face-to-face too, for the most part, because they're in person and there's no way out. They have to participate. They almost have to be there to participate.
Exactly.
Or
Yeah,
to become engaged,
Absolutely. So. And that's it's a big thing, not just in the education system, but I can tell you firsthand, as a government employee with businesses, we are dealing with that nonstop as well, because of how many employees that we don't have in the office. And the thing is that, we're starting to open back up. So we're starting to take volunteers. Guess how many volunteers I got?
0. Yeah. I was going to say, I wonder how much this online, is affecting our society, because people, they're having a hard time getting people back into the office. They don't want to go. Some people want to file lawsuits because they don't want to go, because they haven't all of a sudden have an issue, so it's really going to be interesting to see, And then that all cuts into the engagement piece that you just talked about, you know.
Exactly.
So, you know, we were already dealing with kids who were playing video games, who didn't want to go outside and play. They're becoming LBs. And now we have adults who don't want to go back to work, but yet they feel that you owe them. And so as long as they do their job, they should be able to station themselves wherever they want to go, but yet they're not being engaged. So it'll be interesting to see how all this turns out, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. And I work for Human and Social Services. So I work for that department. So the department that I supervise does case management directly. And you can definitely tell in their case management actions and their timeliness of turnarounds. And, you know, when I do case reads, you can tell the ones that are still working versus the ones that just have it.
Right.
And
I believe it.
And I still provide both types of feedback because, you know, when you're writing their work performance evaluation is no different than you giving a student a grade in a class.
Mm-hmm.
So you're giving them that feedback and you're allowing them the opportunity to rebuttal you essentially, or give you their line of excuses of why they can't do something.
Mm-hmm.
And so I let them know, look, this can end at any time. And I think
Right.
schools are starting to go back in starting fall of this year.
Mm-hmm.
So enjoy it while it lasts.
Yeah, I'll go back to the anxiety reference that Dr. Daria made. I have a friend whose son was autistic and he was in high school, and now his anxiety has dropped. He prefers to be taught virtually. He does better. So I've seen the positive outcomes as well. And so that's where, you know, I think our district is now, they gave us a program choice. Either you can choose virtual, in person, or homeschooling, which in the past we did have a virtual school, but a lot of people didn't know about it. It was for those students who wanted to go ahead, really, who wanted to take extra classes. So I think that it's definitely here to change. And if the districts and schools are starting that way, then I hope that the workforce itself understands that that's also an opportunity for, you know, companies to do the same thing, because companies have sold their buildings because their offices are no longer on site, but they're also that having those workers close to their family and not having to drive through traffic, it's caused them to produce better too. So it's also the other side. There's, you know, and it outweighs, I don't know who outweighs who, but there's so much that is going to change. Like you've mentioned, we have to just wait and see what's going to happen.
Yeah, it will definitely be an interesting transition. You know, personally, I can tell you on my line of work is that, you know, we are waiting for new regulations to come down from CDSS. And so our current regulations end June 30th. And so we're already rolling out to where people are going to be re-engaged in case management, where they're going to have to participate, where, you know, that is said, done, and over with. And now it's time to get back on and do business as usual. Unfortunately, with the field that I'm in full time, is we don't have necessarily the luxury of being able to do business at home for the most part. It's actually made our lives a lot more difficult because somebody has to be in the office and printing those documents and sending those documents. And we still have people coming to the office that need assistance, that need immediate help. And if we don't have workers here to help them, then they can't receive that help. So I know that a lot of businesses have definitely prospered, and they've seen, as you mentioned, the productivity of their employees increase because of, you know, those advantages. And then some of us obviously have seen the disadvantages. And it's in some instances, especially with I feel government the most, is that it is a disadvantage to our community. These kids, I know I have a 7-year-old, him not being in school is just like Dr. Dario was saying, was, you know, he's been on the COVID diet. That's what I call it. And, you know, not being able to play sports and not being able to do this and no socialization, like you see your child change And so I've seen a lot more negative than positive with this transition. But I'm grateful that we're going to have more opportunities for those who have a positive influence on it.
Oh, absolutely. And I was just chatting with our principal for the high school, and they were saying how they're going to have to come up with some sort of, not necessarily rules or protocol for the students that have never entered on campus. So the freshmen that started this year, they've never set foot until now. And so they got to get acclimated back in the fall, and socially, how are they going to do that? So they want to have a program right at the beginning of the year that will aid these students in kind of getting themselves back blended into society and trying, that teenage high school life. So hopefully they do that. I'm looking forward to that because my son will be a freshman. So I'm excited that he actually gets to go on campus.
Absolutely. And so I know that it's just 2 letters, AM, and this chat said that as a graduate student, online classes have saved me a lot of time and money. And absolutely, I can concur with you 100%. I did both my master's and my PhD completely online. As a grad student, I think that you're more disciplined though.
Yeah,
paying for it.
that's true.
You're paying for that education. You don't have grant funding. You don't have, you're lucky if you get a scholarship. But I know personally, I'm over $200,000 in debt right now. So you want to make sure you're doing your classes and you want to make sure you're passing your classes, and you can't get anything less than a B in grad school. So you're a lot more disciplined as a grad student, especially than an undergrad and a new undergrad.
Exactly.
Definitely different versus, any grade level, K to 12, primary, secondary, and then, you have college, university, then graduate. It's different in each level, very different. Because I know my son won't turn on his camera either, but he's doing great in all the classes. The only class he'll turn it on for is PE because they have to do stuff and move in front of the camera and stuff. So, which is great. I'm glad that is part of it. But there are times when the teacher does say, you need to see yourself and let me know you're there. So I think it's been a different experience all around. And
Yeah,
definitely.
I agree. And like you said, Jack, there are some advantages too. You know what I mean? Now, I will say that online learning you have more work as an instructor because you have to make sure that students are getting what you're teaching them. But there are a lot of successful people, a lot of people who've had success with online learning. I agree. I'm just talking about the engagement piece when students don't want to be engaged and you're trying to be inclusive, but yet they're not participating. And so that's how my question originated, but I totally agree. I've seen the advantages of online learning, but if you're paying for it, of course, you're going to be a little more attentive because you want to get your money's worth.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that that is definitely one of the biggest things that we see is that differentiation between, even in discussion boards, you can tell the difference between a freshman or a sophomore in an undergrad program compared to a graduate student. Is they figured out, how to substantiate their claims with support and research and back those things up. And so their discussions are more complex than just, I agree. So, I appreciate you having me. And
we appreciate you. So, don't go anywhere. We want to keep you abroad and just, we want to utilize that great brain and information, and that the interactiveness is what really helps the engagement. So I'm so glad that we had a little bit of discussion here. What we're going to do at this time is I'm going to pause, and then we'll come back at 11:20 for our next speaker. She just flew in from Egypt last night, so she's trying to adjust. So I'm going to give her some extra time. But try to log back in at 11:20, and then we will have our final presentation by Dr. Maha Murad. So, and her seems very informative as well. At this time, thank you so much, Dr. Lovato. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you again. Have
Absolutely.
a good
Hi, Dr. Mohad.
Hi, Jack. How are you?
Good. I was just going to let you know that I already have your presentation uploaded, and I'll go ahead and if you want, I can advance when you let me know.
Okay, I shared my presentation. Are you going to share it?
Yeah, I can share it. So if you want to stop share, that would be, it would be okay. But do you prefer to do it yourself? You can still do it.
I just want to be able to move between the slides easier.
Okay, then you go
Okay.
ahead. Yeah, just leave it there then. Whenever we're ready, I say start at 11:20. Is that okay?
Okay. Yeah. Great.
Okay. So if you just want to mute yourself, and then that way, as soon as
Okay.
5 more minutes, we could start. But thank you. I appreciate you being here. Welcome to California.
Yeah. Thanks a lot. Yeah. I hope next time I will be on campus.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Hoping so.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back. And we have our final presentation right now, and we are going to welcome, and literally she just flew in last night from Egypt. So her name is Dr. Maha Murad, and she's going to be talking about post-COVID-19 adoption of mobile technology in an emerging higher education market. So I just wanted to give a brief biography of Dr. Murad. She's a tenured associate professor of marketing at the American University in Cairo, and she's also the chair of the Department of Management. Her former visiting associate, she was a former visiting associate professor of business studies at Drew University in New Jersey. She was granted a Fulbright Scholar in Residence grant at North Central College, Naperville. She awarded her PhD from the University of Nottingham Business School in the United Kingdom. In addition, she has 2 postdoctoral research grants, the Fulbright postdoctoral research and at George Washington University, and the Erasmus Mundus postdoctoral research grant at Warsaw School of Economics in Poland. Some of her interests in research include brand equity, service marketing, innovation marketing, and higher education marketing. Over the past 5 years, she has had more than 36 intellectual contributions, including top-tier peer-reviewed academic journal articles, conference proceedings, and case studies. One of her papers was selected as a highly commended paper at the Literate Network Awards for Excellence 2012, which attests to value and excellence of her work. She received the University Excellence in Research and Creative Endeavors Award in June 2014 and the School of Business Excellence in Service Award in June 2019. She taught a variety of marketing courses in Egypt, Dubai, and USA. Also, her professional experience includes several national and regional consultant assignments. So without further ado, you can go ahead and start your share screen, Dr. Murad, and welcome to the Global Education Conference here at University of Riverside.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for the nice introduction. Could you see my screen?
Yes.
Is that fine? Okay, great. Okay, thanks a lot for this nice introduction. As you see from my bio, yes, I'm an associate professor of marketing, and marketing is my main area of specialization. However, my passion is education. And that's why I prefer to have this line of research, which is marketing higher education. So I'm trying to make a mix between the marketing concepts and the higher education, and how can we brand, reposition, and so on, and manage risk in higher education as a market in general. As you see in my bio, I have several international experience in different institutions, and that's why usually you will find that most of my research depends on comparative analysis, where I'm trying to compare the perception of higher education brands in different markets and see to what extent the culture could be a factor in influencing the decision to join a specific university and perceive the brand in a specific way. This area now is becoming extremely interesting, especially post-COVID-19. What the perception before COVID, what is the perception after COVID, what we need to change, what will happen after COVID-19 when it's come to the market of higher education. Are we going to stay with the traditional way of delivering? Are we going to change the way of delivering? Are we going to accept the online teaching and the online and adopting online technology as well? This is an extremely important area that we are trying to investigate, and we have several lines of research focusing on this part. Another point that I want to add to my bio is that I'm the chair of the management department. So that's why I'm highly involved in the decision-making process relating to what will happen post-COVID-19, the new mode of delivery, and the idea of the dual education system, where we're going to mix between the traditional face-to-face education as well as the online education. So that's why this presentation is just a part of a very big project about the new innovative methods in education. I will start the presentation briefly. If you have any question, you can just put it on the chat, or we can just open the discussion once I'm done with the presentation. As I mentioned, my focus is on higher education, and it's extremely interesting area when it's come to the research, because now the competition is severe when it's come to the higher education service, because now, especially in Egypt, it's not only a matter of a local competition among public and private universities, but we are facing international competitions as well, because the easy access to different universities worldwide. So that's why we're always keen about branding, understanding the branding strategy, understanding how to be competitive, how to maintain the brand, and to study and the health of our brands and be always the lead and having a leading position on the global education market. So that's to say that now we are so much market-oriented institutions. So any educational service now is moving from just the idea of looking for the quality assurance and the delivery of the courses and the quantity and so on, to start more understanding the needs of the stakeholders. And we mean here by the stakeholders, not only the students, but the students, parents, and the labor market as well. So that's why we are moving to be so much market-oriented institutions. Being market-oriented institutions, the first point is to understand the nature of the higher education service. Higher education is a service, as any service that we deliver to final consumer. And that's why this service usually is characterized by being there's highly perceived risk in the selection process. And that's why we usually say it's a risky decision. Why it's a risky decision? Because when you select the higher education institution, you are mainly influencing your career, your position, your future. You will spend time consuming the service. So it's not, and usually it's expensive as well. So usually it is a risky decision. And when it's come to risky decision, if you look at the literature of service generally, especially when there is a very high perceived risk in the decision, usually it's characterized by being experiential, creditness, and search qualities. What we mean by these, experientials mean that sometimes you cannot judge the service. You cannot judge whether you are satisfied with the higher education service or not, except during the consumption. So it's not like the product that you're going to see, you're going to evaluate and then decide before consuming it. You are going to evaluate during the consumption process. And that's why monitoring the consumption process is extremely, extremely important. This is not only the case. Definitely, there's some attributes that you're going to search before joining or selecting the universities. But the most important point is creditness qualities. Creditness qualities where you cannot evaluate whether you like the service or not, whether you benefit from the higher education or not, except after graduation. And this is mainly the challenge. So service, especially education service, is not like buying a product or a normal service. You have to evaluate some search qualities, some experience qualities, and most important, creditness qualities, which is the value of the service after consumption. And this is actually the starting point. It's a risky decision, so we need to know exactly what are the factors that influence this decision. And one of the most important factors that influence the decision or minimize the perceived risk is the brand. So when you have a strong brand, automatically, this will give you a clue that during experience, during creditness, you will be satisfied as a consumer or as a student. And that's why most of the higher education research now, whatever the area is, the end result is to what extent these activities or initiatives will going to influence the brand name. Okay, so actually, higher education used to be a risky decision, but post-COVID-19, it's more risky. Okay, and it's more harder to take the decision which institution to go to, whether to start locally, to study locally, or to study internationally, whether to select a major that could be delivered easier online, or you are in a practical major, so you have to have face-to-face. To what extent all of this affect the brand name of the service itself? So focusing on students' experience as the main differentiation tool in higher education is what we are trying to focus on. Students' experience, and to what extent the students' experience influence the brand name in the higher education market. The objective of this research actually is to look at only one part of this experience, which is the technology, and to what extent students are willing, not only students, honestly, the stakeholders, students, faculty, and administrator in the organization are willing to adopt and to invest in new technology in order to enhance their delivery of the education post-COVID-19. And this is extremely important to study from the perception of different stakeholders. Are they willing to do this or not? And this is mainly a very big project that we are doing now. One of the aspects that we focus on is the mobile technology. And why mobile technology is extremely interesting, because when we start doing this research, even post-COVID-19 and pre-COVID-19, we find that there is a very, very, very big difference in the perception. We didn't perceive using the mobile in the education system as a positive initiative from the students or as a positive tool to be used to enhance.
Dr. Murad, we can't hear you right now.
Excuse me? Do you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, so only the last part that you didn't hear?
Yes.
Okay, I will return back the slide, which is the research
Sure.
objective.
Okay.
Okay. So for this research objectives, the main research objective of this project is to study the new technology that we are trying to use now in the higher education, and to what extent this technology affects the perception of the consumers, the students, of the learning environment, and hence influencing the brand name. So this is the main objective of this big project. In this paper, I will only focus on one factors or on one variable, which is the using of mobile technology. Not the blackboards, not the other innovative tool that we are using. The focus is only on the mobile technology. Why we are focusing here on the mobile technology post-COVID-19? Because when you look at the perception of the adoption of mobile technology pre-COVID-19, it was completely different. Okay, so this is what attracted our attention here, and that's why we want to focus on the mobile technology. The empirical evidence of this research is in the Egyptian higher education as an example of an emerging market, and this is phase one. You will see by the end of my presentation how we are in the process of starting a comparative study in different countries. Once more, why mobile technology? Because what we discover is that, as I mentioned, there is a change in the perception. So pre-COVID-19, it was one of the rules in any class, and it's there in the syllabus: don't use your mobile, keep your mobile off, don't use it in the class, and so on. And it was a serious problem, and it depends on the faculty to what extent they were going to take an action if they find that the students is using the mobile in the classroom. And this was the perception. They are using the mobile for chatting, they are using the mobile to do whatever not relating to the lecture. Now the situation is completely different. A lot of students are using the mobile, accessing the Zoom, accessing the classes through their mobile. So to what extent there is a change in the perception from a stakeholder point of view, and to what extent we can capitalize on the mobile technology to be able to deliver the lectures in a better way and to have a way for interactive as well. So this is the idea of mobile as an example. And the main objective is how we are shifting from the traditional method of face-to-face delivery to online or hybrid way of delivery. And what about the brand perception if we start using different methods of delivery, such as using the mobile technology to deliver the lectures. Okay. The research methodology is that we start with literature review as usual and qualitative research. The qualitative research here is not intensive, it's just an exploratory research to understand the perception of the different stakeholders. All of this we use to enhance the existing model that we have. And then the next phase will be quantitative analysis, where we're going to use survey in order to test the results and have to generalize the empirical contributions. Our exploratory research here was through 15 in-depth interviews done with different stakeholders post-COVID-19 from September to December 2020. This is the model that we adopt, that it was already known in the area of technology adoption and the link to marketing and perception. This is a well-known model by Rogers. And in this model, he is trying to test the factors that influence the decision to adopt technology in general. And then we start applying this model to the higher education marketing, and we have a lot of empirical results that we are capitalized on. In this model, it's mentioned that what are the factors, or focusing on what are the factors that make the adoption of any type of technology easier for students, and hence this will enhance the diffusion of this technology among specific settings. So in our case, we are looking at the mobile technology, and the factors that we are focusing on: number one, relative advantages, how it's perceived by the students as well as the faculty, and there is relative advantages of using the mobile, mainly convenience as a factors. Is it convenience or not? The second one is compatibility. To what extent it's easier to open the Zoom, it's easy to open the Blackboard, it's easy to access the material. If there is a simulation, they can just access the simulations through the mobile, and so on. This was another factor that we asked about. Another one is complexity. To what extent it's complicated to use the mobile as a way to access the material. The complexity is extremely important. Observability, is it image-wise? Is it attracted to students and faculty to use the mobile, to what extent this affects their image and their perception of the education service as well. Perceived price level, is it expensive or not to use the mobile technology, and perceived playfulness. Do they enjoy using the mobile technology in education or not? This is another point that we test as well. And to what extent all of these factors affect the adoption of the mobile technology in higher education. Definitely, there was a lot of moderators, such as the demographic part, age, gender, level of education, and so on, which are the demographic factors. There are marketing mix variables that we also take in consideration, such as word of mouth, social media, and the perception, and whatever factors affect the perception of the brand among students, and also the handset type, whether they are using iPhone, whether they are using a smartphone in general or not. This was another point that we take in consideration as a moderator. When we start doing the interviews in the exploratory research, we found that relative advantage, complexity, compatibility, perceived price, and perceived playfulness of using the mobile are dominant, and they are influence the students' adoption of the mobile technology in higher education. These are the main reasons why they are adopting the mobile, or prefer to use the mobile rather than using their laptop for accessing the Zoom meetings and even doing the simulation and the group meetings and so on. Also, when it comes to observability, it was correlated to the adoption. But when we measured this factor, it was not significant enough. Okay, hence it's clear that the students in the higher education accept the using of the mobile technology post-COVID-19. And the point was, when we look at the stakeholder, what about the faculty point of view? Do faculty accept this, or still the faculty finding that using the mobile technology is not proper enough and they have to access the lectures through their MacBook? And this is another line of research that we are focusing on. The main results here is the change in the stakeholder mindsets. Okay, so there's a very strong change in the mindset of the perception and the effect on the perception of the students on the learning environments, because actually what happened is that the mobile is only an indication that there is a complete change in the mindset of stakeholders on the concept of online delivery of the lectures. So we used to perceive the online delivery of the lecture that this is a compromise of the learning quality, and the students must be on class face-to-face, direct interaction with the faculty. But post-COVID-19, it's not an option anymore. And we have to shift to the online education system, and we have to work on making this perceived positively by the stakeholders. So changing the mindset of the stakeholders is an extremely important area that we are focusing on. How could we prove that using mobile technology or any type of technology to deliver the lecture still results on very good quality of higher education equivalent to the face-to-face interaction? And hence it was, this research is a good understanding of the factors that influence not only the mobile adoption in higher education, but all the technology in higher education, and to what extent it is perceived positively, because based on the result, almost 80% of the applicant respondents, faculty or students, accept the adoption of the mobile technology in higher education and any other type of technology, to the extent that now the argument is, post-COVID-19, are we going to return back to the class, or are we going to still deliver this hybrid link mode of delivery, where some of the lectures will be face-to-face and other lectures will be online, and the students can access this through the mobile, through their laptops, through whatever mode, and they can just interact, and this will not going to compromise the quality. Our managerial implications was mainly to what extent this influenced the decision of the stakeholders, mainly the administrative and the universities, to adopt this mixed mode of delivery, including more than one technology in delivering the course, creating a learning environment focusing on technology and creativity, and to what extent this will will enhance the higher education in general, enhance students' experience in general, and hence enhance the university brand name and mode of delivery. And it's extremely important area because now we are changing even the perception of the distance learning. We use not to perceive the idea of distance learning, especially in Egypt, as an example of an emerging marketing. We usually do not perceive it positively because usually we have, in a way or another, have this perception that it's negatively affect the accreditation of the institution. So if the institution depend on more technology in delivering the courses, mobile technology or any other type of technology, usually this negatively affect the perception because it negatively affects the accreditation and the quality assurance of the university. So all of these are extremely important. As I mentioned, this is only the start of this research, but later on, this is just an exploratory study understanding the perception and the different factors. We will not be able to generalize the result except if we extend it later on in a more empirical research, focusing on more than one country. And this is just a framework that we're going to use later on to study the perception of higher education post-COVID-19 and the adoption of new technology. How we're going to do this? We're going to use Hofstede model because the culture dimension is extremely important. I'm talking here about Egypt and the perception and how there's a change in the perception of the online delivery of the classes, which was not the case, is not the case in other countries like US, for example. It's highly accepted here, but in Egypt, it's still a new phenomenon to be accepted. So that's why the plan is to have this empirical study and to adopt and to measure the adoption of this new technology in higher education in 4 different countries. And we're going to use Hofstede model because we believe that culture is a factor that influences the perception of the brand in general and the adoption of technology in specific. So we're going to select US and we're going to distribute a sample. It will be part of our sample. US because it's characterized by being high individualism and high uncertain avoidance based on Hofstede model of culture. And another sample will be from UK because they have high individualism but low uncertainty avoidance. So they are not risk taker, not like US. US are more risk takers when it's come to the decision. UK are to some extent conservative when it's come to decisions. We're going to take Egypt because they have low individualism. Low individualism means that they are usually they prefer to work in groups, and this usually negatively affect the perception of online education because when they work in groups, usually there is a very big question about cheating, plagiarism, and so on. So Egypt is characterized by being low individualism and high uncertainty avoidance. Also, they are high when it's come to avoiding the risk. Poland is the 4th country that we're going to select because it's characterized with low individualism and low uncertainty avoidance as well. So, so that's why we're going to use a sample from 4 different countries representing 4 different cultures and do the comparison analysis. And this is what we're going to do in the future research. I don't want to give you a long presentation, so this is all about my presentation, and I'm open for questions and discussion if you have any specific question that you want to raise.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. I appreciate that was really informative as there is so much going on. In the previous presentation, we also discussed, the technology behind it and how engaging a student can be in higher education or even in primary, secondary education. So it really is something that everybody is looking at, and having this as a proposal and then doing the research, we'd love for you to come back and present and see the results from that.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Yes.
First of all, I enjoyed your presentation. Thank you so much. It was very informative. I know that you mentioned that you have to, that your stakeholders require accountability. How will you present that to them? What are you using to show that learning is taking place and that your students are using their technological tools appropriately?
Yeah, this is extremely important. First of all, let me just give you an example from my university. We are, number one, it's not an optional anymore. You have a lot of external factors forcing us to have this direction, like having COVID-19 now, it's not an option. We have to move to the online education system, and we have to investigate this area. So if any university would like to stay delivering the service, they have to invest in technology now. Right? It's not an option anymore. This is to start with. But to convince them that post-COVID-19 to continue investing in the technology is mainly based on the result of research. We created a center called CLT. It's a center for measuring the new tools in education and enhancing it and searching for the return on investment of these tools as well. So so that's why we are trying to show them the result, and they are convinced to invest, because if they were not going to invest, they will be out of the market. As I told you, it's by the end, it's a competition. By the end, it's there's a lot of competitors. Even in the Egyptian market now, we have 3 different categories of universities. We have the private universities, the public, and now we have foreign universities opening campus branches on Egypt. So the idea is that if they cannot, if they were not going to invest, they will not be able to compete.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. I do have another question for you. I just find
please.
it interesting. I find it interesting that they have a negative effect or perspective about technology. And as you mentioned, you know, when you did the UK and Poland and, you know, Egypt and the US, that some of us, for example, in the US, some of us are trying to figure out, do we want to put some programs all online because we can reach more people? I think it's interesting that you said that you're in Egypt, there's a negative perspective, and here we are trying to reach more people through technology. I just thought that was very interesting, you know?
Yeah, I will comment on this point. Yes, this is 200%, because based on the research that we did with the faculty as stakeholders, they perceive this online, they highlighted different challenges. Number one, the workload. We have a perception that when we move from face-to-face delivery to online delivery, the workload is much higher.
It is.
We did a lot. Yeah, it's based on our research, it's triple the efforts when it's come to preparing the course in a different way, having this direct interaction with the students, being there to the students all the time. So definitely they perceive this as a high workload. This was one of the factors. The second problem is that a lot of faculty depends on their personality, charisma, how they interact with the students in the class. So that's why they are worried about their online evaluation. So they believe that when they deliver the course 100% online using this technology, their evaluation will be negatively affected. So this was the second factor. The third factor that they are having is that it's extremely challenging to put the exams. Start putting the exams, okay, it's time consuming because the nature of the exam is not the same anymore. It's mainly based on research, assignment, application, and so on. So correcting this type of exam is not easy. And on the same time, the plagiarism is there. Even we are using technology like Turnitin and so on, softwares and so on, but still there is plagiarism. And also they cannot guarantee that the students are not working together, even if it's an individual assessment. So these are the 3 factors that were result from the research that negatively, that's why it's perceived negatively by the faculty. And
I agree with that.
Trying to encourage it. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're most welcome.
Thank you so much. Good information. Great questions, Dr. Daria. Is there anyone else that's interested in a discussion or a question for Dr. Murad? Am I pronouncing that right?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. I just want to make sure. Sometimes it's, you know, different accent on a different letter, so it's all right. Let's see. I don't see anything in the chat or in the Q&A, so it looks like we're okay. They're saying thank you. It was great. So it was definitely informative. I really look forward to future conferences because these questions and the research, it's just going to blow up. It's going to be so much.
Yeah.
So they're just going to be, you know, now you're going to get some answers, hopefully within a year, you know, or so. So it's going to be quite interesting in the field of education for sure.
Yeah, what we are doing now, it's a very big research. Honestly, technology is only one factor in this research, but we are trying to measure all the factors that influence the intention to choose a specific university that deliver online, that deliver the courses online. So the intention itself is the main area of research, and we have different factors. Technology is just one of them.
Oh, absolutely. I agree with that. Well, we thank you for everyone's time today. And I just have a few things to clear up and kind of present so that you understand what's coming with University of Riverside. So something that we started a few months ago, actually last December, so we've been doing quite a bit of these. We're trying to offer free webinars for individuals who would like to just log in and listen to individuals who have had experience in a certain topic. So our next one coming up is next Friday at 11 a.m. And these are Pacific Standard Times. And it's agility in healthcare, and it's an insight from clinical and surgical settings. And if it's not even, in your field, it's still interesting to learn other aspects, and you can still apply the agility. The way this professor talks, the agility can be applied to a lot of different organizations and even yourself, personal agility. So we look forward to him next Friday. If you need more information, it is a registration, and you would go to uofriverside.com and click on webinars. And that's how you would find out about that. And then finally, thank you for attending today. Your attendance means so much, and this is what keeps us going, even in this COVID-19 world. When I first started this job a little bit over a year ago is when COVID happened. So I have yet to do an in-person conference. I've been doing virtual. So as that whole social anxiety of just school and stuff like that, I'm like, the first in-person one is going to be just as difficult for me. So I really appreciate your attendance virtually. I know that we're all getting virtual fatigue at this point. So thank you so much for being here today. Try to keep updated with us. Stay tuned. There's always more to come. We have different websites, our Facebook, our Instagram. We do have the YouTube channel, which is Global Conferences USA, and you will see this posted there as well. And then we're also on LinkedIn on Global Conferences USA. So that's that, and we appreciate your business, of course. Thank you so much. At this time, I don't have anything except for I would like to just say thank you again, and your certificates will come by email. If you have, if you've given me the name, I need to know if that's what you want on the certificate. I know some of you have a middle name. Please send me if it's different than what I have, what you would like it to say and what order you would like your name on the certificate that way. Or you can, type it right now in the chat box to myself, and then you definitely will have the correct name on your certificate. Okay. The other thing I'll do is I compile all these and I try to do a book of abstracts or a conference proceeding. It's very hard on there to include the PowerPoints. We are trying to get back on Blackboard, but we're having a little bit of difficulty there. And everything else will be there, their paper, their abstract, their bios. So it will be available. If I can somehow link the presentations, I will try to do that, and you'll find out about that. Other than that, enjoy the rest of your Thursday, wherever you're at, whatever day it's going to be. We appreciate you being here today. Thank you so much for attending. Everybody have a great day.
Thanks a lot. Thank you.